On this episode of The Talent Cast, Yoda, The Goonies, and tales of brave Ulysses as he journeys through your ATS. Howdy! Welcome to The Talent Cast, where we talk about the new world of talent acquisition and recruitment marketing. I, am your host, James Ellis. I was bitten by a radioactive recruiter once and discovered I had strange new powers, and thus we are here. This podcast is not sponsored or supported by anyone whatsoever. We've instituted a 100% no pitching rule. We're here to learn, teach, and discuss so we can all become better recruitment marketing thinkers. I'm not here to sell you anything. If you like this podcast, and I really hope you do, tell the world on LinkedIn and Twitter and any other place you're professionally social. I'm pretty sure your friends don't care. You can always review us on iTunes or Google Play. We really appreciate that. As always, if you have comments, questions, topic suggestions, if you would like me to discuss your particular problem, if you know someone I should interview, reach out to me on the Twitter. It's The War for Talent. That's right, The War for Talent. Or just go to our website. We're at thetalentcast.com, thetalentcast.com. Otherwise, here we go. Hope you enjoy. All right, we're recording. So welcome to the Talent Cast. I have as my guest here, it's our second guest of all time. The first one worked out so well, we're doing it again. This is Sarah Yang. She is the talent content marketing manager at a little company called Workday. We've talked a couple of times about content. I think we're very simpatico, so I thought she would be a wonderful person to bring on. In terms of bio, she's kind of smart. She's written and produced a whole bunch of sitcoms and short films, and she's done a lot of stuff. She knows her content. So with that, hey, Sarah.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad it's Friday.
Yeah. That's true. I don't think we recorded on a Friday yet, so this is, big thumbs up.
Oh, wow. I feel so special.
Well, not just yet. Okay, so we'll start off this way. We're going to talk about creativity today, but we'll start, is creativity and innovation, they're the same thing, right?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, it's a misnomer. People do think of creativity and innovation as the same thing, but the way that I would define creativity is the ability to generate new ideas versus innovation is the implementation of a creative idea. So, creativity is coming up with the idea, and then innovation's actually putting meat to the bones.
So, in a recruiting content space, which you and I both kind of live, I definitely know that coming up with new ideas seems to be a bit like hitting your head against the wall, that you feel like you got to come up with something genius and amazing to really describe why people should work at this company. And is that really what we should be focusing on?
Well, I think it all boils back down to just like how we're biologically wired. We're all wired for story. So in anything marketing, recruiting, you're putting people, when you put people into the hero's journey, of them accomplishing a goal or overcoming an obstacle, that's what's going to draw people in. So I feel like with recruiting, with any type of marketing, that's a key component of successful content. It's the story. It all boils back down to the story.
So when you say story, I think story, much like the word strategy or content, or there's a lot of words that mean everything and nothing. How do you see the word story, or how do you use when you're talking about story? What do you mean?
It really, for me, I look at story as the hero's journey. It boils down to putting a protagonist facing a call, crossing a threshold, facing tests and challenges, and then coming into the unknown, facing their fears, and then overcoming and coming to a place of resurrection. That's like the overarching definition to me of story. It's that journey of realizing there's an obstacle that we have to face, and either it's a tragedy where we don't overcome that obstacle, or it's a comedy, or it's a hero's journey where you actually overcome.
And that makes a lot of sense if we're talking about Luke Skywalker, or we're talking about whatever the main character of The Devil Wears Prada, whatever her name was. But we're talking about recruiting here.
Right.
Who's the hero? What's the journey? What does that look like?
Well, it's funny because right before I got onto this call, I'm helping with the job description, and the way that I'm putting it together. I mean, it's as dry as job descriptions can be. I am forming it in that narrative of
Really?
I'm putting that person who's reading the job rec in the shoes of a protagonist, a hero, facing a challenge, and are they going to rise to that challenge? And I know that it sounds funny, but I feel like that's what's going to draw people in. So, in the actual paragraph to introduce the role, I'm saying, okay, we're looking for a trendsetter. We're looking for someone who's going to set the standard and establish a new program. That's a hero's call, calling them and saying, this is the challenge that you need to face. This is what's going to be required of you. And how are you going to face that challenge? So, yeah, I know. That's just how my brain works. And, hopefully I don't... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, clearly you're broken. You're not. The lawyers are on the phone. They're telling you can't do that. Job descriptions have to be boring. It's a law. It's a federal thing. I'm told.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait to run it by the hiring manager and see how they react. But I explained that's what drew me into this role. I read the job description written by my manager, Bethany Tuzolino, and she put in there, I'm looking for a creative storyteller. And she presented it in a way where it's like, are you going to rise to the occasion? This is a challenge. This is a new role. You are going to be the one who will establish a brand new program. Are you? Yeah. And it was the hero's call, and I responded, and I'm glad I did.
So when it's structured like that, do different people respond to different kinds of hero's journeys? So for example, in what you're talking about, this is someone who's starting a thing, inventing a thing, versus a job where you're managing a thing, or you're inventing a thing, or you're there's probably a couple other things. I'm thinking of the archetypes. But what other kinds of ways would you position that story for different kinds of jobs?
That's a great, well, you hit it right on the noggin there. It is like the 7-story archetypes. Like you would form it differently for different roles. There's the rags to riches, overcoming the monster, the quest. So I think for this one, I'm forming it as overcoming the monster, because this is definitely like a huge undertaking for this particular role of establishing a brand new program and managing. I should just pull it up. And I cannot read it because that would not be a good idea for me. But
not yet.
Not
yet.
It'll
be public soon.
Yes, but ultimately we're framing it as Workday is a best place to work, and how are you going to contribute to making that a reality? We need someone who's going to be forward thinking and implement an enterprise-wide solution. So that's a huge undertaking. So you're facing the monster of implementing this entire enterprise-wide solution. So yeah.
So when I talk about archetypes, it's funny. You talk about something different. I think of them in terms as the king, the magician, the rebel, the magi or the sage, the princess. These are the character archetypes. And so I know a lot of work has been done from a brand standpoint to say, and they always use Harley Davidson is the rebel archetype, right? That's who they are. And that IBM is the king archetype. They're the best of the best, and they're there to provide information and they're leading the direction, whereas some are more about upstarts and some are more, they're very different ways of doing it. You're talking about something completely different. So why don't you talk a little bit about story archetypes, because I'm fascinated.
Oh, great. Yeah, and I'm fascinated as well. I actually haven't heard the character archetypes tied into marketing, and that's fascinating. This one is actually from The 7 Basic Plots by Christopher Booker, but he states that there's 7 classic story archetypes, the first one being rags to riches. I guess you can see it as the story Annie, right? Overcoming the monster. We could look at that as Luke Skywalker, right? Or that's more like facing his demons. But the quest, I look maybe Goonies. I'm thinking Goonies. I love that movie. I gotta tie that in somehow.
Oh my goodness. Okay. See, I'm 44. That movie's for me. I don't. Is that really for you?
Yeah, I'm a lot older than I look, thankfully. So,
Well,
but yes, Goonies was my favorite movie.
that's
On that
amazing.
note, what was your favorite movie growing up?
Growing up, Star Wars probably. I mean, you kind of couldn't choose anything but that. It was Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. There was, not to get too personal, but for most of my childhood, money was a function of, it was $2 to buy an action figure. So action figures were my currency. Everything was broken down to how many action figures would that be? My allowance was how many action figures can I buy with that, or how many weeks to get an action figure.
Oh wow,
That's how obsessed. Yeah, I'm a weirdo.
No, you're not. No, that's great. I love it. And I'm guessing you're into comic books as well, right?
A long time ago.
Sure. As in last week.
Oh. Wow, this took a turn.
Okay, I'll get back on track.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
So let's talk about the power of story. So, when you talk about these archetypes, the presumption of an archetype is that these are deep-seated ideas that you are plucking in somebody else's brain. So when you talk about the monster, or you're talking about the rags to riches, this is something everyone understands regardless of where they're from or when they were born. Mm-hmm. This is just part of human nature in whatever weird way our brains are wired. So how do you leverage those things to get people to understand your employer brand, to get people to understand why they should work for you?
Because people are the ones that we're recruiting, and they're the ones who are going to do the work. And when you're dealing with people, you really are dealing with stories. And Matt Hines of Hines Marketing talks about how you always bring everything back to stories because it's always about people. And great content is emotive. If you're pulling at the heartstrings of somebody, if you're people are interested in the emotional tissue between us. So when you're able to really present a story and content that's emotive and visceral, that's actually what creates the differentiation and the preference for brands. So it really is like recruiting, marketing, branding. It all ties down to how can you tug at the heartstrings, because that's ultimately what's going to drive us. Recently at Content Marketing World where he spoke, I heard a great talk about how neurologically when we are we respond first emotionally, and that actually intrigues us and gets us to investigate. So when you actually pull someone in through emotive, visceral stories, then they'll pay attention to what you have to say. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. So you got a few seconds to grab their attention, and the best way is through emotive storytelling.
Wow. So have you seen examples either in recruiting or out of recruiting where the story is really leveraged as a marketing concept, that it's the structure upon which everything else is based?
That's a great question. Well, I think people are tap dancing around it at Content Marketing World, but that's why I'm here. I'm a filmmaker now at a enterprise software company, establishing content marketing here, and Bethany knew what she was getting into. I'm a storyteller. She wrote it, creative storyteller, and that's what I want to do. But to answer your question, I haven't really seen it done effectively, but I hope that will change.
Okay, so let's take a pivot here. So how can anybody else leverage story in their recruitment marketing? Beyond rewriting a job description for a hero's journey, is it something you can use to come up with better ideas? Is it something you can use to communicate internally to your company to kind of get buy-in? What are some other ways you can leverage storytelling creativity?
So in everything that I'm working on right now. So right now, working on telling a cohesive story, tying in perceptions and personas, and our strategy, our framework, our employee value proposition. And in tying those three elements together, it is like your persona is your protagonist. The perception is really the challenge. When we look at the personas, what are the challenges that that persona is facing in wanting to come to us as an employee. And then tying in our strategy, our framework, our employee value proposition, that's proposing the solution, the way to overcome those challenges. Yeah. So that's one way, in a macro level, how we're tying in story. And also just even creating the content at each stage of the funnel. You're taking them on you're leading them into a further stage of the journey, and how you do that is transitioning them through the overarching stages of the journey.
So if you connect to the funnel, is it one long journey through the funnel, or is each stage of the funnel its own journey?
That's fascinating you asked that. I to be honest, I've been thinking of it in the framework of it, being one overarching story through the entire funnel. But you make a good point. It could be, it could be both, really, because each time they have to move on to the next challenge. So, yeah.
Because in my mind, there are some audiences, they see the job description, they go, yeah, that's for me, and they hit apply. In that case, that job description that you're writing should be an entire hero's journey. Mm-hmm. However, there are plenty of people for whom they go, okay, that's a good start. Now I'm going to do my research. Now I'm going to ask some questions. Now I'm going to go get some feedback. Now I'm going to get some validation. That can be a journey as well. So how do you reconcile the journey of the micro and the macro when you have two very different audiences and different processes going through the funnel and getting them to have the same goal, which is apply? But if they take two different paths, can they have the same journey? Are they different journeys, or am I asking a dumb question?
No, this is a great question. The way that I would break it down, so I've been mapping out our content strategy for next year, and it is like I broke it down to our target audiences. So I probably shouldn't say who they are, but
nope.
But for each target audience, I'm mapping out where they are in, if they're passive candidate, it's just outreach. Like, what are the three content pieces that we need to move them on? At least assist them at the question that's relevant to that stage in the journey. So, at the top of the funnel, they're most likely asking, who are you? So how can we tie the three content pieces? So it's more of us assisting, almost like, I guess, a Yoda in the Skywalker analogy, of just giving them
killing me. You are killing me.
You said that you're a fan.
Well, wait, how dare you remember?
Yeah, but that's how I see it. Like, we're gonna be that sage in the journey, the mentor, the master, to give them exactly what they need to prompt them, hopefully, to move on to the next stage.
So when you're developing these stories, you're saying you're tying them to personas. And I know that I've done this enough to say that when you say personas, it's another word that says, it can mean, oh, it's women between the ages of 20 and 22 who like soccer.
Right.
It could also be psychographic and political and geographic and buyer tendencies or motivation states. Or how deep do you have to get to build a persona that can actually support a connection to a story that makes sense?
That's a great question. I think the more we can get into, the underlying motivations, that's going to really be what drives them. Like, that's because my background is filmmaking, and screenwriting. We would have to map out, even before we began the story, who is our main character? What drives them? What motivates them? What sickens them? What excites them? Like, we had to really break down the psychology of the protagonist, the main characters. So I think it's the same thing. Like, the more you can get your persona into that kind of, like, what really keeps them up at night, what will get them up in the morning. That's the best. If we have that in the persona, we're gonna, half the work is done. Then you just tie the story into the journey. Tie it back to what motivates them, and you'll draw them to the next stage.
So if you're building a story, and I like the idea of focusing on the motivation, because I think that's what drives people to click a button or not click a button, or read a thing or not read a thing.
Yep.
How do you know when you've nailed the motivation and that the story you're telling connects to that? How do you where's the click? Where's the, oh yeah, that works?
Honestly,
or is there such a thing?
Trial and error. Like, that's the thing. Like, with all of this, I feel like iteration is just a part of the nature of the beast. Like, that you're going to iterate and see what works. You're going to look back on the metrics and see, oh wow, that really caused them to go to the next stage of the funnel, and what didn't. And it's a lot of iteration, but I think there are things that you can map back to and just say, okay, like their key driver, family, so what really, as we map out the content, like if one of our blogs tied tremendously into, I don't know, like a limited PTO or work-life balance, which that's a debatable term these days. But
oh yeah.
But knowing that that's their key driver, that's their key motivator, then we know like that's going to be what pulls that target audience into the next stage.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because I know that you are very passionate about using story and storytelling to generate new ideas. Mm-hmm. So do you do that in your work right now? Is there a process where you're bringing your talent community or talent team together and say, okay, we're going to solve a problem, or we're going to come up with a new idea, or we're going to use storytelling to do our work internally?
Yeah, actually, we trying to think about what I can share.
No, I completely understand.
But yes, so outside of before I joined Workday, I actually taught a creativity workshop and seminar with a good friend of mine, David Nyquist, who's a painter and muralist, and actually just did these exercises with students at Hayward High on Wednesday. And they're extremely effective, but I'm actually going to take my team through these exercises, but it's just a way to activate the right side of the brain, because all of us, we all have a right side of our brain, so everyone's creative, even though people, have the assumption that they're not creative, but everyone's creative. I mean, a short note on that, if you watch Sir Ken Robinson's talk, he talks about how they tested 1,500 kindergartners and to see, how they score in divergent thinking, which is the, foundation of creativity. And over 98% of them scored a genius level. So we're all creative. It's just a matter of unlearning what we've been taught as like there's only one answer and it's in the back of the book. Yeah. But anyway,
No. That's a great digression. I tell a lot of my team, I say things like, for the last 16 years, you've been lied to that someone has an answer. The world doesn't have an answer. It's whatever you can defend or prove or believe in or support. That's the right answer. There's no teacher's edition.
That's exactly right. Which is why I believe so much in iteration and just trial and error. And because, what worked 5 years ago and was a best practice today can be completely irrelevant. And which it is. Like, I feel like, especially with technology changing so quickly, like, maybe, infographics were the thing, 3 years ago, but now it's not. And you just got to keep evolving to take the form that's going to be effective. Yeah. But I'll just give an example of one exercise that we did in our seminar that really works. It's draw the color yellow. And describe the color yellow without using, like, to somebody who's never seen it before. Yeah. It just gets them out of the typical mindset of like, okay, the whole right or wrong, exactly what you said. There's a million ways you could describe the color yellow. There's a million ways you could draw it. There's no right or wrong. It's just what's going to communicate it effectively for you and to another person.
So how does one become better at telling stories and using storytelling to solve problems and inject communication and problem solving into a business environment?
I think I'm learning that right now. I mean, when you think about the hero's journey, I don't. Maybe it's just how I'm wired, but I see story in everything. Like, and it is the fact that we're biologically wired for story. It activates our brains in ways that other things can't. Like, facts and figures will not like be remembered. And so, like, how is it relevant to the business world? In every single possible way. How many presentations have we all sat through, and they have their bullet point slides, they give you a bunch of statistics, and like 5 minutes later after the meeting you have no idea. You totally forget it.
Yeah.
So, like, what's going to make it memorable? What's going to make it sticky? It's always going to be story. And so, like, it is 100% relevant. Anybody who ever presents, anyone who ever tries to communicate an idea or a process, or framework, has to tell it in the context of story, or else it's forgettable. It will not make an impact.
Yeah, Tom Peters, who is on my personal Mount Rushmore, he talks about, he interviewed with CEOs, and they say, what's the thing that everybody needs to have and skills they need to have as they add to the workforce and grow their careers? And they said, oh, you need to be creative, you need to be innovative. And then he turns around and he goes to the deans of all the lead business schools and say, do you teach creativity? Do you teach innovation or storytelling? They'll go, no, that stuff's the hard part.
Yeah, and it's some of the most vital, and that's totally why I've seen this need in the business world. It's become, especially, I've been in tech now for 5 years, and it unfortunately has become very left brain, and they're missing such an essential component, which they think it's mushy, and there's no teeth to it. But what they don't realize, it is the number one skill of the 21st century. Like, you look at who's successful in our day and age, it's the Steve Jobs, it's the people who come up with the best ideas, who can think divergently, think differently, and come up with something that's never been done before. And that is what defines success in the 21st century. And it will be even more so as technology advances. So it is everything right now.
Yeah, because it's the one thing machine can't do.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And, like, just looking back in history, we came from, like, the 19th century, our agricultural age, and it's about who had the biggest farm, and then the 20th century, the industrial age, who had the biggest factory. But today, as long as you have a good idea, like, how many stories have we heard of people becoming YouTube stars, or like, it's such a low barrier of entry. If you have a great idea, you can express it. And even this TriCast that we're using right now, if you have a great idea, you can explode.
Yeah.
You don't need all that, what we used to, with factories. It's just like you had $1 million to start it up. No, that's not there anymore.
So, last question before we kind of close things up here. And I like that you brought up this concept of ideas. I think a lot of people think when they say, I need to come up with a new idea, they're coming up with a huge idea, a massive idea, an Uber, a Netflix, a massive life-changing idea. Do you need to come up with ideas so big to make an impact, to create some value, or is there a level of idea to which you go, yeah, that's good enough, that's enough to actually drive something forward?
That's a great question. I think everything starts small. I think you're building, and as long as it has a place of influence and it's communicating effectively from one group to another, it's successful. So I wouldn't narrowly define it as an Uber or Netflix. We're seeing. It's interesting. So on Wednesday, I taught to an entrepreneurial class in Hayward. And as I was there, I really realized there's a revolution happening in education, and that needs to happen, because the educational system was built on, like, the industrial age. It was an assembly line. It was like people just going through an hour of math, science, English. But today, it's the entrepreneurs that are actually going to drive innovation and be successful in this day and age. They're going to be the ones who are not, like, anything but an assembly line thinker.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, like, I heard some of the ideas of this entrepreneurial class of like, 15 to 17-year-olds, and they're brilliant. And they're actually starting to make money on their ideas, and that's what the class is all about. And you got to start somewhere. And in my mind, they're extremely successful because they have an idea and they're implementing it, and it's making, they're able to sustain it. So yeah, that's success to me.
Wow. So from a storytelling standpoint, what are some resources you would recommend for people who are interested in learning more?
Oh, good question. I think, is it Joseph Miller? I'm blanking. It's
Yep,
a Friday. Yeah.
Joseph Campbell.
Campbell, thank you. Joseph Campbell, yeah. That is brilliant. Well, this is kind of sort of related, but there's a book called Falling Upward by Richard Rohr that I read recently, and it's all based on the Odyssey and how that's the first half of life, and then there's a second half of life, and it's all about the voyage and return. But the Odyssey is pretty much the quintessential hero's journey. Like that, I think, if you want to tie it back to where it all started, I think that's where it did, So that, and let me see, what else would I
do like the concept that maybe when you're writing recruiting content, you're going, how do I beat the Odyssey?
I love it.
Set the bar high.
Yeah, no, totally. I think the other, books I would recommend are more having to do with creativity, but The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, I love. And I think it does tie in like the narrative. Her second book, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's all about developing your personal narrative. Oh, The Vein of Gold by Julia Cameron. I would say that is an excellent resource for storytelling, especially until you know and own your own story. It's hard to know and own anyone else's story. So I start with yourself, and if I had one book to recommend, it would be that, The Vein of Gold by Julia Cameron.
Well, there you go. So as we close up, how can people find you online or learn more about you?
Sure. They can find me on LinkedIn, Sarah with an H and then Yang. I do have a WordPress, but it's severely, it's been severely neglected, but hopefully I'm planning to resurrect it soon. So there's a hero's journey for it right there. It's a resurrection of a character. So yeah, hopefully I'll get that up. But for now, LinkedIn. Yep, Sarah Yang with Workday.
Fantastic. All right, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us for this half hour. This has been fantastic. So have a great day, and hopefully we'll talk more soon.
All right, sounds good, James. Thanks so much.
Do you love news about LinkedIn, Indeed, Google, and just about every other recruitment tech company out there?
Hell yeah. I'm Chad.
I'm Cheese.
We're the Chad and Cheese Podcast.
All the latest recruiting news and insights are on our show.
Dripping in snark and attitude.
Subscribe today wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We out.